Part 5. 21. It was warm in the shadowy gloom of the stairwell and smelled of earth and roots. Reckless of footing on the twisting, crooked steps, Sisky hurried after Tinqua, one hand clutching his shoulder, the other Tam's coarse-woven sleeve. Half-glimpsed figures jostled past them, some crowding upward, a few rushing down, trailing snatches of chatter. Suddenly there came a cool draught, waking up, like a breath across the snow, and a dim greenish glow flickered over the rough walls of the shaft ahead. The earthy odor gave way to a chill smell of stone, and the nearby gigglings and twitterings faded into an echoing confusion of many voices floating up from below. A few more turns of the stair, and they were at the bottom, ducking out of a lopsided opening into a vast green-lit space, and the confusion was all around them. It was the gathering, so much Saskia knew at once, and she had known it would be alive with folk and their voices, no matter how many were outside dancing on the moor or swarming up and down the stairs. What she had not expected was to be half stunned by the chaos of laughter and the music dashing about. She stopped where she was, engulfed by such an upsurge of old memory, old habit, that she could barely think, much less figure what to do next. Her hand caught slack on Tinqua's shoulder. He was gone at once. Her whole impulse was to dart away, too, join the nearest circle capering about a fiddler, snatch a handful of berries from the long tables, find old Flungenfool, and steal his pipes. "Lor, will you look at yon diamonds?" came Tam's hoarse whisper in her ear. "All over the ceiling, a million of them, and rubies and such like on the walls, and all these grand lords and ladies wearing silks and furs and plumes in their hats. You never told me it was like this here. It's finer than I ever saw in the Kingstown, I vow it is." "What are you saying?" gasped Saskia. She started from Tam's marvelling face to the rough rock walls of the gathering, the faint crystalline glitter high on the dome overhead, the folk in their shabby greenish tunics and scarlet caps. "It's the glamoury," she exclaimed, giving his sleeve a sharp tug. "Don't heed it. Nothing's mine here. It's a trick. Come along." "Ah, the feast's laid out here," Tam was saying, deaf to her warnings, already starting on the tables and pulling her along. "Never saw the like anywhere. Swans roasted with their feathers on, whole great fishes. Look at the cakes. Lor, I'll wager it's that fairy man in the flagons yonder." Saskia gave his arm a yank with her whole strength behind it, and he half fell toward her, protesting as he caught his balance. "Come away, I said," she shrieked at him. "There's no swans and fishes there. It's dock and sorrel boiled with turnips or some such, and moonberries and bogwater." "Come away, Tam. But there's oranges. I'll just have a taste." "You'll taste nothing. You mustn't. Not a bite nor a sup. Don't you remember?" Saskia pled with him, and at last he looked at her and seemed to recollect himself. "Aye, I mind now. Nary a bite nor a sup. Here, let's go out in this place, away from them tables. But I don't know where to go." The frantic need to cope with Tam had just jarred her momentarily out of her own dreaming, loosed the pull of the old life. She must stay free of it until she found the child. "Don't think how it used to be," she told herself sternly. "Not yet. Don't think of nothing but mamma's child." "Where's that Tinqua?" Tam demanded. "Got away from me," she confessed. "Up on the moor by now, for all I know. He'll come back before the prince does. He wants me pipes. Don't rightly need 'em till then, 'cause I mind now where the nursery is. I can work out how to get there." She started for the far end of the gathering, threading her way among the cook fires and the milling folk, still with a firm grip on Tam's sleeve. He lagged often, exclaiming over some wonder he could only see, or begging her to stop a moment and hear a fiddler's tune. She merely insisted, I dasn't, and tugged him on. It was hard enough to keep her mind on what she was doing. Distractions clutched at her from every direction. A familiar lithe figure with floating hair darted past, stopped abruptly, and turned to stare at her. Another slipped up beside her to tweak upon her apron ties, poke at her bundle. A third or fourth stood whispering all together, watching her with tilted lavender eyes, and one of them said, "Mockle?" Then another, crowned with laughter, seized her hands, ripping her away from Tam into a wildly whirling dance that left her giggling and excited, with no desire to do anything but join the next circle that swept her up, and the next, and the next. Time slowed and raced bewilderingly. She lost all sense of it until she spun out of the dance and sagged breathless against an earthen doorway, groping after some urgent purpose that eluded her. Frowning about, she found herself on a familiar yet oddly unfamiliar threshold, this low, rough arch like the entrance to an animal's den. Could this be the door to the schooling-house? Surely that was larger, more welcoming. Welcoming? Help me! Her own voice echoed chillingly in her memory. There had been no welcome the last time she had gone through that door, and no help either. This time someone was helping her. She knew someone was, though not where he was. But why was it she needed help? It came back in a rush. Tam! Tam! And the child. She looked around wildly. I'll be right back. Found herself in a familiar. Oh my gosh. She looked around wildly, caught a glimpse of Tam's dark hair and gangling figure amongst a circle of dancers halfway across the great cave. He was laughing, lurching, as they tugged him this way and that in the complex patterns of the dance. She pushed her way toward him, fitting off reaching hands, trying not to hear or see or think until she got a firm grasp on his arm. At last she held it, pulled and shrieked at him until he broke out of the melee and stumbled after her to the nearest rocky wall. "I lost you," he gasped, leaning against the rugged surface. "We lost each other, and we mustn't, do you hear? We dasn't. I'm still," she broke off, "I'm still half folk," was what she was realizing with something like fright. Neither one thing nor yet quite another. The folk had wanted to dance and tease and cared for nothing but the paths and the band. The other half wanted to pay the prince out, give Mama back her child, and which half would win? The folk half could barely remember the mission. "Lost meself too, for a while," she told Tam shakily. "Keep tight hold of me, don't let loose." His hand closed on hers. "I won't, I won't. It was jolly, though, that dance. Don't think of it. Come along." Again she headed for a door she knew was somewhere on the opposite side of the gathering from the winding stair. This time she stayed close to the uneven stony wall, away from the comings and goings and whirlings of the center. Tam ducked repeatedly to avoid the jutting overhang of the rock that easily cleared folks' heads. Even Saskia had to crouch at times, but she kept a sharp eye on scanning the shadows nearest the wall, and was finally rewarded with a glimpse of smooth-worn wood. "There!" she exclaimed swiftly, and dodged into a narrow cleft blocked by a wooden door. Tam, bent almost double, stumbled after her. A push on the wear-darkened edge of the door's panel, and it turned in its pivot to open a slit at each side. "Lord, I can't get through there," Tam muttered, but he squeezed through after her somehow, and the way opened slightly, zigzagging upward. The door creaked closed behind them as they rounded an angle of rock and stepped into a corridor patterned with shadows and pierced at intervals with glimmering openings. At once it was easier to think, to keep her mind clear of confusion, the waves of forgetful excitement. After a moment to get her bearings, Saskia crossed to peer cautiously through the first doorway into an arched cave-like room. It was lighted dimly but steadily by glowworms clinging to the rocky wall, and cold fire torches stuck here and there into the sandy floor. A whiff of cool earth-scented air came out to meet them, along with the sound of tiny stirrings and snufflings, an occasional muffled peep that put her in mind of a nest of hatching chicks. "It's the nursery," she whispered, pointing to the row of little round cribs around its edge. She tiptoed in, alert for the little Moor woman who should be there, guarding the little ones, often times with the aid of the servants, enticed or captured from the outside. At first she saw no one. Then across the room she spied a lone aged figure, curled up on a pile of bracken, asleep like her charges. Beyond, a dimly glowing archway led into some farther chamber, and a folk-shaped shadow flitted across it. There was no sign of the child. "Golden cradles they have," breathed Tam, who was peeking wide-eyed into the nearest of the tiny beds, "sleeping on the eiderdown like little lords." It was only thistledown, and his golden cradles were nothing but rough grass baskets lined with leaves. He was off on his marbling again, and it was worrisome. Suppose they both forgot what they had come for, but Saskia wanted no time in arguing. Instead, she peered around for a pot of the ointment she knew must be here in the nursery somewhere, for it was used daily on the babies. One touch of it on his eyelid, and he would see what the folks saw, not the glamoury conjured up to blind and bedazzle outsiders. She spied a squat stone jar on a shelf, darted to it, and had just dipped a finger in when something blotted out the light from the archway across the room, and one of the ancient caretakers came hobbling toward them, scolding shrilly in the old language. Saskia retreated hastily, twittering apologies. "Only me, Nursey. Meant no harm. We're off now. Gone." She backed out into the corridor, turning to push Tam ahead of her into the shadows clustered next to the well. "Here, do you see that?" Tam was exclaiming, dropping his voice to a whisper, and Saskia hushed him, but twisting to look over his shoulder. Wearing a crown she was. They got queens to look after, and the little ones. "What was she saying to you? Telling us to clear off. Hist! Just stand there, quiet." They were huddled behind a jutting chunk of rock, Saskia waiting till she heard the muttering that told her the old nurse had hobbled back into her earthen realm, then turned swiftly to dab her finger's worth of ointment over Tam's nearest eyelid. She reached toward the other, but before she could touch it, he dodged, protesting, and the last of the ointment was lost in his hair. What have you done?" she gasped, peering down at her finger, which was wiped clean. "What were you doing, poking your finger in me, he asked in bewilderment. "Only trying to make things easier." She drew a quivering long breath, hoping she had not made them harder than ever. From now on Tam would see the truth with one eye, but diamonds and golden cradles with the other. It seemed no use stopping to explain. "Come on, the next room yonder might be spinning house." But the next faintly glowing breach in the wall opened into the byre for the red-horned cattle. So much was plain to their noses, if not to their eyes. The one torch lit only an empty cavern. The cattle, too, were out on the moor tonight. Saskia pulled Tam onto the final doorway. One swift glance into a wide, low room showed her idle looms. A work-scarred table littered with spindles, piles of tattered wool gleanings, and the wads of cobwebs she had always known would be there. Shelves held earth, green, homespun, and a bolt or two of paler cloth that shimmered with cobwebs, iridescence, and stirred gently, as if too bubbled light to settle down. It was spinning house, tonight silent and deserted in the vaguely pulsing glow lights. Cautiously she stepped in. The doorway was wide but low enough to make Tam duck, and as he straightened she waited nervously for the first test of his mismatched eyes. For a moment he merely blinked as he glanced around him and muttered "Lord," then frowned and rubbed his right eye. It was the one she had touched with the ointment. "What do you see?" Saskia whispered. "Piles of gold stuff. Are they fleeces and silks and here in that spinning room, ain't it? Yonder's looms and such like, all silver and jewels." He rubbed his eye again. "What do you see to me then?" "Feels half blinded." "Cover the other one." Saskia told him. He did so, and the sudden dismay on his face told her all she needed to know. With both eyes open, plainly the glamoury bedazzled the shabby reality, but he was seeing truth now. Before she could urge him to keep the lying eye covered, he abruptly used both hands to seize her shoulders and draw her back into the shadows. She turned at once and forgot everything else. From the inner doorway a small figure was crossing a room toward the cluttered table, a little girl with dark, loose, hanging hair, nearly Saskia's height, though she was chubbier and younger. Despite her greenish folk garments, she was not folk. She had neither long hands, feet, nor the alert, darting glance. She was a human child. But there was nothing childlike about her dull, listless expression. Her drifting progress across the room. Not the one, Saskia told herself quickly. Mistake. Then the child had turned, and the greenish torchlight fell full on her face. It was round, dark brown face, set with sky-blue eyes that made Saskia catch her breath, for they were Anwara's own. There could be no mistake. This was Mama's child. 22. Saskia stepped forward into the light, drawing Tam with her, and the child halted. The blue eyes glanced, unsurprised at Saskia, but widened at the sight of Tam. She shrank back a little and stood staring them. "Don't be afraid. Nobody's going to hurt you," Saskia assured her. "She's got nothing but a slow, uncomprehending look in reply." "Is she dead?" Tam muttered. So Saskia it seemed more as if she were sleepwalking or entranced, And that might be, she thought with a little thrill of fear. She moved cautiously to the table, reached across it, and took the child's arm. "Can you understand what I'm saying?" she demanded. Then, on sudden thought, she repeated the question in the old tongue. After a moment, the child said softly, "I can. She talks the folkish," Saskia told Sam in relief. "Reckon she's never heard anything else." In the old tongue, she asked the child her name. "Leka," was the answer. It was not even a real name, merely the word for stolen. The indifference of it, the folkishness, made Saskia angry. "Aye, you were stolen. It's so. You don't belong here. You're human, like him. See his eyes? Here, look close. Yours are blue, like that. Your hair's dark like his. You've got a mama and a dad outside. We'll take you back to him." For a moment she thought she had got through the fog of enchantment of the brain within. A puzzled frown passed across the child's placid forehead. Something stirred in her eyes. Then it was gone. Her face was again smooth and passive. "I'm not to go through the turning door. I'm to finish these fleeces," she said. She sat down at the table by a wad of gleanings and began to pick the thorny twigs and leaf bits out of it. Her fingertips were already rough and sore-looking from such work. "Hey, you're doing nothing but slavery," Saskia said indignantly. "You don't want to stay here. Why won't you come with us?" She reached for the reddened little hand, but the child evaded her. "What's going on?" Tam demanded. "Can't get through to her. Tried explaining, tried coaxing, but they got her spellbound on some such, or she's just— Try plain telling her," Tam said. "She'll likely mind you. You look like folk." He glanced over his shoulder into the corridor, rubbing uneasily at his eye. "We can't bide here. Night's passing, and we're a long ways from out." He was right. Here was no moon, no changing sky to tell them how far the night had advanced while they were dancing with the revellers, locating the turning door, or how soon the prince would tire of the moor and come back to the mound, stealing the stairway to all but folk. Hardened because Tam sounded again like Tam, not the glamoury, befuddled stranger the mound had made of him, and hoping this one anointed eye would keep him so, Saskia turned to the child. This time she simply grasped the chubby hand, removed the twiggy fleece from it, and gave it a firm pull. "Come, Leka, you're to go with us," she commanded. Without protest the child arose, came obediently round the table, and followed her out of the room, back along the shadowy corridor past the dim-lit nursery, where a stooped silhouette told Saskia that old nursery was still on guard. A few steps farther brought them safe onto the last steep slope of the pivoting door. Here Leka ceased to be docile. Her hand jerked out of Saskia. She backed away. "Here, what are you up to? Come along," Saskia whispered, clutching at her in the gloom. "I'm not to go through the turning door," the child said clearly. "Hist, be quiet." Saskia made a frantic grab and tried to tug her forward. Leka planted at her feet. "I'm not to—" the clear voice began. It was muffled by Tam's big hand. He said nothing, merely picked the child up bodily and pushed her face into the folds of smocking at his shoulder and jerked his head toward the door. Saskia's swift push turned it on its pivot, and he struggled through. Leka prisoned his arms. "Didn't I say you needn't be carried over?" He was panting to Saskia as she ran ahead along the final narrow cleft into the gathering. She never answered. The burst of voices and greenish light and rushing motion engulfed her again, all but swept her away. She reached dizzily for the rocky wall beside her, grasped a handful of Tam's ragged cloak, and clung to it. "Best hang on to me," she gasped. "I can't hang on to the two of you," he protested. However, he swung Leka to the sandy floor, keeping a wary eye on her while he reached backward to Saskia. Then his voice softened with surprise. "Hey, look at that, will you?" Saskia tore her attention from a circle dance forming nearby and with an effort focused it on Leka. The child was blinking up into Tam's face with bright, interested eyes and tentatively smiling. The change was astonishing. "She's come out of it, likely because she's passing through that door." Saskia's gaze lingered on now the vivid little face, and a strange wistfulness drifted over her, as though some inner door in herself had briefly opened on an unknown landscape of feelings. Mamma, I warrant you'll like this gift," she thought. "What now?" Tam demanded, pulling her back to herself. "First we hide this child," she told him. "Where, in me pocket?" Tam's grin appeared, and Leka peered up at him and grinned back. "She likes you, that'll help," Saskia said, "'cause I think you best take her on your back. I'll put your cloak over the both of you, and the hood over her head." Swiftly, in the old tongue, she told Leka what they were doing, and Tam hoisted the child up, wrapping his arms firmly around her chubby legs. "Next," he said, "next she has to find Tinkwa. Only folk could get Tam up the stairs and out of the mound unchanged, unharmed. No use searching the ever-shifting groups of dancers for one particular capering figure. If Tinkwa was there, he would elude her forever. If he had fled out of the moor, forgetting— well then, she thought the rascal never get any pipes. Nothing to do but make for the stairway entrance, as he hoped he'd be there waiting. She could see it directly across the expanse of the gathering, a lopsided arch. "Come," she cried, with an imperative yank on to the shifting throng, heading straight for the stair. It was like plunging into a whirlwind with a bog underfoot. Greenish forms bumped and jostled her from all sides. Laughter mocked her. A mud-like dragging on her feet transformed her dash into a dream struggle in which she could scarcely see or move at all. She came to herself, flattened, breathless against the same wall she had left, feeling as if she had been flung against it. Tam, with Lekka still clinging on his back, was standing anxiously in front of her, breathless too. The child looked wide-eyed and startled. It had been easy enough to go deeper and deeper into the mound, but every step in the other direction was impeded as if the mound itself were taunting them. "You managed to get in, have you? Let's see you get out." Angry tears sprang to Saski's eyes. "But it's me, Mockle!" Part of her was protesting, though she knew well that she was not Mockle, would never be Mockle again. "You don't rule me now," she told the mound defiantly. "I'll get us all out. You watch." Tam gave a hitch to his passenger, scowling uneasily about him. "That stair keeps moving. Here, then yonder. How'll we ever get to it?" "You'll see things again," sighed Saskia, struggling to get her wits together. To Lekka she said in the old tongue, "Put your hand over the left eye. Keep it there." The child hesitated, but obeyed. Tam's face went blank in surprise, then an expression settled over it as his gaze fixed long. But he only muttered, "This is a rare, curious place." "It is," said Saskia grimly. "So now we'll try walking backwards." She turned herself about, and Tam, blinking and grumbling a bit under Lekka's persistent hand, turned too. At once they began to make progress. So it was some use to be half-folk, and no stranger to folk cunning. Now if Tinkle were there, waiting. They were halfway to the rough archway when a long-fingered hand reached suddenly out of nowhere to tug at her arm, pulling her off balance and back toward the wall she was fighting to escape. "Leave go!" she exclaimed, and turned to find Tinkwell beside her, panting and breathless. Come on, the prince is coming in. Be quick." "But that's the wrong—" She looked wildly over her shoulder toward the stairway entrance. "Where are you taking us? Don't argufy. Come on." He, too, flung a swift glance toward the stair, and gave her wrist a yank of surprising strength. She could do nothing but stumble after him. "Should I clout I'm a good un?" puffed Tam ferociously, close by her ear. "Nay, leave him be. Likely knows what he's doing." She could only hope she was right, and they hadn't left it far too late. She could hear faint chiming of bells and echoing from the stairwell, the voice of Horn, and stir of fresh excitement in the gathering. Plainly the prince was all but on the stairs. "I'm here, in here," whispered Tinqua, shoving her ahead of him to the narrow cleft they had so recently left. "Go on with ye." "You too," snapped at Tam, "or stay behind if you like." But Saskia, confronted again by the turning door, set her heels and faced him. "We've just come from here, you rascal. What kind of rare trick are you playing?" "No trick, I vouch. Through that door, sneak past the babies. Easy to say. That nurse'll catch us sure this time, and we can't hide for long in the spinning house." "No need to." Tinko was all but jumping up and down with anxiety. "Get on with it. You through the door." "But there's no way out." "There is. Do you think they'd take the Redhorns up those stairs?" She stared up at him in an instant, then gasped. "Tam, come!" She squeezed through the turning door, Tinqua after her. But Tam did not follow. Holding the door with its pivot, and peering back through the slit, she saw him rock still in the narrow passage, staring back through the cleft into the gathering. "Tam, Tam!" she insisted, and she saw that he was holding Lenka's hand away from his lying eye. She darted back down on him. "You must come!" she all but shrieked at him, seizing his arm and shaking it with all her strength. Then at last he turned, clapped Lekka's hand over his eye again, and followed her. Stumbling with relief, she led the way through the turning door and along the shadowy corridor, Tinqua now harrowing them from behind and all but snapping at her heels, past the nursery and into the byre, still redolent with red horns, but still empty. "Behind the last stall, quick!" Tinqua hissed at them. They plunged through the dark opening into a rocky tunnel that sloped upward and showed, far ahead, an irregular patch of light. Saskia ran eagerly, wildly, elated as always to be heading for the moor. When they burst out at last into the mild heather-scented air of a summer daybreak, she felt such joy that she would have kept running straight ahead, had Tinqua not yanked her behind the same big boulder that hid the stair. Tam dropped down beside them, panting, easing Lekka to the ground and flicking his cloak over her. Through a screen of brush, Saskia saw the hillside suddenly swarm with capering figures. Then the piping and the fiddles and the bells filled her ears as the prince and his troop came dancing across her thorny peephole, blotting out the last stars in the paling sky. They passed within arm's length to descend into the mound. The voices and music grew rapidly fainter, faded, were abruptly silenced as by the closing off the door. After a moment a drowsy bird chirped. I'll be right back. 23. Tinko was the first to recover, straightening from his crouch to grin and dart a lavender glance at Saskia. "Near caught us," he remarked. "Too near, thanks to you." Her heart was thumping wildly, whether from fright or relief or sudden wretchedness at that abrupt silence she scarcely knew. She stood up, hesitated, then slipped around to the other side of the boulder and gazed bleakly but without surprise at an undisturbed stretch of ordinary rocks that had just visible to the pre-dawn light. At the door into the mound she could see nothing, and likely never would again. She was turning away when she saw a crouch. A stifled exclamation, a moment's incredulous staring, and she went over to pick it up. Another instant she stood with it in her hands, then moved back around the boulder. "Tam?" she said. He was confronting Tinqua. The fault could never again hide from his anointed right eye, but he turned when she spoke, looked at the crutch she was holding out to him, and nodded. "He's back inside there, in the mound. You saw him?" "When we were leaving." Saskia drew in her breath. No puzzle now. Why he had stood there rock-still in the passageway, deaf to her urgings. "Coaxed us for certain sure, didn't he?" "Reckon he aimed to all along," Tam said thoughtfully. Saskia hesitated and then asked, "See him eat anything?" "Eating and drinking with both hands. He was a purpose." Tam turned again to Tinqua. "Here. How long before he's free? Prince'll throw him out when he's a mind to." Tinqua evaded. He edged away, tugging at Saskia. "The chanter! Give me a chanter!" Tam seized his arm and held him. "Tell me when." "I don't know. Time runs different. 12 months and a day, maybe. Or 7 year. Or 50. He shrugged, pulled free. "Or maybe 200, he added. 200 year?" Tam whispered. Tinqua was dancing with impatience. "The chanter, give it to me. You vowed I'd have it." "Aye, you will, you will." Saskia loosed the shawl from around her waist, worked at the stubborn knots, then quickly, before she let herself think about it, drew out the chanter and gave it to him. He snatched it with a crow of triumph and was gone, leaping and carpeting down the hillside to where the moor water and Virgil's hunt, already piping one of his wild, folkish tunes. She turned back on him. Tam had not moved, but stood staring at nothing. "Or maybe into the void of 200 years. Likely Bruman got what he wanted," she ventured. "Aye, raised his glass to me and laughed like I'd never seen him laugh since I don't know when." Tam smiled crookedly himself. "I took a look with me and I to see what he was seeing. It was rare and wondrous, right enough. He took a wrong breath. Too late to mend anyways. But supposin' that Prince knows I'm out before he's ready? You might come back to see a 12-month and a day, just see." "We will, and maybe in 7 year." Tam roused himself, adding firmly, "But now we're leaving, the both of us. No more an hour to sun-up, but then you best be gone. There's still the child." Tam seemed suddenly to realize the plan was not finished. He swung round to peer toward Lekka, still huddled under his cloak. "You'll never take her clean to the village?" he said in alarm. "You dasn't show yourself." "Nay, I'll take her to Grandmum. Old Bess," Saskia commended. "Easy to reach her cottage and nobody the wiser. Done it lots of times." "Then let's be at it," Tam said. He bent to lift the cloak off Lekka, gave a startled exclamation and froze, one hand held wide. Even before she moved to look, Saskia guessed what she would see. A child either older or younger than the one they had stolen out of the mound. She was younger, much younger, soundly sleeping, one hand curled beside a chubby cheek, a thumb in her mouth, fine dark ringlets clustered over a still babyish head. The green folkish garments were now absurdly oversized. She looked barely of an age to toddle, let alone, Saskia thought suddenly, able to make the long rough walk down to Torskal, and that before sun-up. "I'll have to tarry her down," she said, and wonderful if she could. The child was plump and sturdily built for all her babyishness. "Nay, we'll take her in the cart," Tam said. "It's mine now, I reckon, for a 12-month. Maybe forever. Ponies and goats and old warrior, too. Come on, Lekka." He woke the child gently, let her blink up at him in a moment, and set her on her feet. Saskia moved closer, stretched out a hand, but at the sight of Lekka shrank away and clung to Tam. "Thinks I'm folk," Saskia said, and withdrew her hand. After a moment she managed to shrug. "Can't say I blame her for shying off. She trusts you. Anyways." Tam picked the child up, grinned briefly. "Little she knows," he said. "If I'd had my way, she'd still be plucking the thorns of such outgleanings, because we'd never have gone in that mound." He started downhill toward Bruman's deserted hut, the animals and cart. Before she turned to follow, Saskia glanced once more around the hollow in the thorn trees, then out over the moor in the direction Tinqua had gone. He would go back into the mound when he had her pipes in his hands, and be at home. But she no longer belonged there. In truth, she did not even belong to the moor in the way she once had, when she was Mockle, in the way Tinqua and the others did. Part and parcel of it, the folk were. same as the heather in the bogs. As for the king's town and the fairs and the land far south by the long sea where she supposed they were going, she could not imagine she would ever belong there, either. But she was sure she belonged with Tam. Now she thought of it, she belonged nowhere either. He belonged nowhere either, and seemed to like it that way. By dawn the old hooded cart was squeaking and rattling down the hill road at the far end of the village in the pink and golden light, the goats ambling alongside and Warrior trotting behind. Tam pulled up in a thicket's shelter, tied the pony to a branch, and lifted Lekka down. A few swift strides, and he was knocking softly at old Bess's door. It opened almost at once. With a muffled exclamation, the old woman stepped out, stood an instant, then took the child into her arms. Little was said, little needed saying, and then Tam was slapping the reins over the pony's rump, and the cart began its swaying, cracking journey back up the steep track over the moor in the direction of the distant town. Old Bess waited, standing tall and still on her doorstep, holding her grandchild. She was rewarded by a glimpse of a long-fingered hand thrust between the old leather curtains at the cart's rear, waving. Old Bess waved back until the cart crested the hill, and she could no longer look into the rising sun. "24. As the years passed over Torskell, the villagers almost forgot the changeling who had once lived there, pretending to be a child. Old Bess did not, but she kept her thoughts and memories to herself. Her grandchild, Leorin, grew and bloomed, and spun the smoothest thread and wove the tightest cloth of any child along the street. She was prettier than most, too. Yano looked at her and marveled at her delicacy, and that he had any part in it. Sometimes, as he worked in his skeps, with the scent of rosemary heavy on the summer air, he wished she were not so timid around the bees, and allowed his mind to wander back to other days. But he could not help being glad she feared the moor, and would never go next or nigh it. As for Anwara, her voice had softened, and her bony shoulders grew plump, and her waistline plumper yet, and her eyes were proud as she watched her daughter grow. Only sometimes, on a still evening, or at midday, she rested from her weeding in the high field, she fancied she heard the high, shrill wail of a piper, playing the strange, wild tune she remembered. Once she even climbed past the edge of Torskell land, and onto the moor, half fearing, half expecting to see a familiar aproned figure with a pale bush of hair playing on Yano's Dawes pipes. Instead, she glimpsed a very small, green-clad piper perched atop a rock, and next minute saw nothing at all. And there was a time she fancied she heard the sound of two shepherds' pipes in unison, playing most beautifully the same strange tunes, but she was never sure about that. And that was the end of the book. Oh, hi. Hi, Matt. How have you been? We just finished reading The Moorchild. That's actually only the second time I've read it. It's interesting. So this was a book recommended to me um, by a friend introduced me to, who is actually Romanian, but American too, and we had a few things in common. And she recommended this book to me. Um, and it's interesting to me because I feel like all cultures kind of have their own like interpretations of fairies, and I feel like that's kind of like it's almost like a universal thing, the thing of fairies, and I just find that so interesting. It's like it's like if they're really not real, and that's another thing too. If they're really not real, then how has that been something that has been passed down culturally, like all around the world? Like if there isn't such a thing as like little spirits of some kind. So in a way, I do kind of believe that fairies exist in at least some way. Um, um, and then there too, it's like it's interesting also how it's like when you look into like stories about unicorns. When you think about like the story of the unicorns, like people people would draw a rhinoceros and think that that was a unicorn, and so it's like there were just so many different stories, and it's like it all ended up eventually kind of settling on something agreed upon. But it's like who's to say when people saw certain things that it wasn't like an animal with a horn? Like I mean there are animals with horns, and but then there are also animals with tumors, which is a sad truth. But it's possible sometimes when people think they're seeing something fantastical that they're seeing an animal that is real, but the animal is just deformed in some way. But it's interesting to me how like all around the world, culture is always kind of like applied these sort of fantastical tales and stories to sort of like help themselves understand or make sense of the things they see around them and they don't know. And then some of it gets like eventually accepted into okay, so this is the way that everybody thinks around the world eventually. Yeah. Yeah. Um so around I would say like the end of the year, maybe around December 30, something like that. I read I think that's when I actually started reading Rumo. And then I kept saying, I'm going to get back to reading Rumo. I'm going to read Rumo. I'm going to read it. And just other things I kept getting distracted by. And I never ended up like going back to it before before that other channel got hacked. So I was like, well, now that I can actually, and that's another thing too. Like I was right about to read it, and then like the thing happened with my live stream where like I couldn't live stream anymore for weeks. Like they disabled it for weeks, and because they thought that I was a child, and I had to prove my age. But they eventually restored permission, and so I was like, when they did, I was like, okay, this means that I should definitely actually read Rumo now. So I read Rumo um, the rest of the way. And then after that, I read two Stanislaw Lem books. Um, and then after that, Stanislaw Lem. I'm thinking there was another one before this. Stanislaw Lem. No, actually, maybe it was just Stanislaw Lem and then the Moorchild. like just 2 Stanislaw Lem books and then the Moorchild. And then there are some others that I plan on reading. That are just others on my Nook that I plan on reading. So I'm making rice right now, so I should probably go check on that. But yeah, I know it is silly. I don't know why they think that sometimes. It's crazy. So I'm gonna go really quick and check on that rice. Okay, I'm back. Got the rice with paprika. So it says I have 70 here, but actually 61 books. So I was thinking of reading Frenchman's Creek next, and then the Grim Lovelies series. Grim Lovelies is interesting because it's about these people who've been transformed from animals into people. And or maybe not. I don't remember if they actually look like people or if they look different from people, but they realize somehow that they discovered that they were transformed into people to be used as maids by this one witch. And um, I don't remember what happens, like what the actual plot of it is, but due to something that happens, this one of the creatures that was transformed wants to become a witch to fight the witch or something like that. I don't know. I don't remember because it's been some years since I read it, but it was actually really good. Although it seemed kind of short, and then it had a sequel. But the thing about it is that to me, the sequel just feels like the completion of the book. Like instead of it feeling like this is another, it's like this is what happens to complete the overall story, kind of. Which it's actually good. I mean, when books are like that too, when sequels are like that, when they're not just this is more of it, but this is picking back up where the other one left off. It's like an extra chapter, but it's not just an extra chapter, but it's like it's just that some books, when they're like that, it feels so much like an exact continuation that it makes you wonder why it wasn't just one book instead of two, except to just kind of like spread it out a little bit. They're both good though. So I was thinking of reading that and Frenchman's Creek and Jamaica Inn. But I'm not sure which order. Like, I don't know which one of those I should read next after this. I feel like I should wait a few hours before I read the next one. Because I feel like if I were to read Grim Lovely's right after, it could almost be confused in a strange way because it's like they're both sort of fantasy. Although Grim Lovely's is more of a, I would say it's a lot darker. Like it's a much darker kind of fantasy book. And then um like there's this scene in the book that that is like it's a completely a backfire. I don't remember if it's the first one or the second one, but it builds. I shouldn't even say this because I feel like that would almost be spoiling it, but it's like there's a part that just doesn't seem like it should be Like it goes completely against what you would expect to happen. And it's like such an incredible like letdown. I guess that's partly what I mean by it being so dark. So it's like there are some surprising moments in it that are like it's more doomy gloomy basically than than what we just read. Um Actually all three of them kind of are three um three options next. But the one that I feel like is less is kind of interesting because it's like sorry. I'll figure out in a few hours which one we should read next. I'm thinking maybe Grim Lovelies after all, but like the settings are different enough, but they're still fantasy. So it kind of makes sense to read that next. But the environment's different. I think it's set in Paris, I don't remember. And then um and then the other two are like mystery, but one of them's more of it like almost like comedy adventure and less of a mystery. Although there is like a history, sorry, there is a mystery element to it, but it's a little different. Anyway, I don't know where Mario is. I think it wasn't this book, but it was but after the streaming of it was after the streaming of the Futurological Congress that he commented, which we should see that. I don't know if that would be possible to watch that on YouTube. But since we read the book, we should watch the movie. The movie is so crazy. The book is crazy too, but I mean, the movie is really crazy. Well, I think I'm going to be. That's another thing too. Um, there are I don't know why I'm having a hard time like finishing my sentences. Um, there are a lot of different new songs I'm looking forward to reacting to. It could be a while. I guess maybe that's what stopped me from saying that. Because it could be a while before I actually um, have them on the channel because of the way the schedule is currently. So I have reactions scheduled into June. Um, so any reactions that I do now would be scheduled even further into June. And June hasn't even started. Um, I'm almost running out of time to do um, skating videos for the end of the month. Um, so I've like nearly caught up with that because the next skating videos are skating videos from this month. So I could do some skating today for the last days of this month, maybe into next month too. Well, I don't mean all just today though. Although, in a way, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that either. To have skating videos that are uploaded sooner. Hmm. I should probably go now. Well, goodbye for now. Um, I'm going to figure out what book I'll be reading next. Bye. Oh, thank you. Oh, that was supposed to be. Thank you. Bye.